Hello, I'm Mitra Sorrells in the FocusWire studio, and I am joined by Sanjay Bhatia. He is Director and Travel Industry Manager at Meta. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely, great to have you here. So let's talk a bit about what stands out for you in the last, let's say, 2.5 years as it relates to consumer behavior in relation to travel. What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think the number one thing we've seen is just a changing expectation from consumers of travel and of travel brands.
Okay.
And clearly during the, at the outset of the pandemic, business travel, really went down fast, and leisure travel just became much more nuanced. And so we saw that really the big pivot we noticed was that there was a kind of a move away from more transactional advertising tactics, and more that brands started leveraging our platforms more, given our visual ad mediums, and the ability to speak, to things like, or themes like safety and convenience and some of the more nuanced themes that arose throughout the pandemic. And the really interesting thing is coming out of the pandemic is that trend hasn't reverted.
Okay.
We're still seeing a lot of our brands that we work with leaning more into sophisticated creative and measurement strategies to create kind of this lasting value with consumers, particularly as loyalty is up for grabs in this state.
And you know what, I should have maybe started with this. Just run through us when you're talking about the brands. Which brands specifically are we talking about?
So our team we work with, across our business org, like many travel brands. We work with many of the top hoteliers, airlines, OTAs, rideshare, vacation rental, et cetera.
And within Meta, we're talking about Facebook, we're talking about...
Each of our apps and services, yeah. So our team services Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, all of the different apps that we have available.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you talk a bit more about how this has maybe changed anything about your business then?
Yeah, I think it is just, it has maybe changed the value prop that we're providing to a degree, and it's really helping brands potentially recreate their relationship with customers in a new way. And clearly, Facebook and Instagram are our top drivers for inspiration and discovery.
Right.
And so I think as this travel mentality shifted through the pandemic, we were just a vehicle to enable brands to speak to customers in the way that they saw fit.
Right.
Whether that was certain recommendations for certain types of travelers, or kind of recreating a brand identity more founded on things travelers cared about in the moment. That I think is where we kind of found our sweet spot.
And what about on the topic of loyalty? That's something we hear so much about. What would you say that brands should be thinking about in relation to loyalty and using the Meta platforms?
Yeah, really good question. I think with just a couple data points that I think stand out, one from FocusWire around 40% of elite status members or highest status members are willing to try a different brand.
Yeah.
This year, which I think is really staggering. It goes to show you how much loyalty is up for grabs.
Yeah.
And then I think with Gen Z is also somewhat interesting in the sense that a lot of research has come out that's shown that they're maybe not as brand loyal as previous generations before them, and their purchases are more reflection of their beliefs or their values or personality. And only 35% of them are in a travel loyalty program today. So we feel like loyalty is incredibly important. I think how that manifests on Meta, there are various ways. I'd call out two that I think are really interesting for brands to explore. The first being app advertising, getting mobile apps into the hands of your customers. We've had the ability to do that for a while, but these users have higher LTV oftentimes.
Right.
And with the app growth we've seen this year, I think 30% app growth in Q1 year on year, 15% in Q2. There's a huge opportunity for travel brands to lean into getting apps downloaded and used on our platform.
And we know that's so important. We hear them talk about it all the time, that's
exactly
where they want to engage is right through their app and get that direct business and build that stickiness for them. So.
Exactly. And one other point just there that I think is interesting, two things. First party data. So the idea of how do you re-engage customers in meaningful ways is interesting. So thinking through what that strategy looks like for your brand. And then this one's a little bit more nuanced, but I think partnerships are really interesting in building loyalty. So if you think about brands partnering with creators, the rise of creators being very well noted. And then secondly, I think lifestyle brands are interesting, or partnerships with other brands to think about how do you reach new customers or customers that you demographics you feel like are really important for your brand. It doesn't always have to be through your brand. It could be through extensions of your brand,
Right.
whether it's creators or other brands.
Interesting. Just talk a bit more about that creator piece. There's real value there if it's done right, I guess, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a connotation with creators that can be very difficult
Yeah.
to execute, and that's not incorrect necessarily. It's a new method of advertising for a lot of brands. I think one data point that I continue to find really interesting is that over 80% of people are relying on travel influencers for recommendations. And so if you think about that, like just their travel is so ingrained, or creators are so ingrained, I should say, in like the travel exploration process. And so a couple things I would call attention to there is I'd really recommend the brand start small.
Okay.
You don't have to think of a scaled program out of the gates. It's like, how do you find 5 to 10 creators that are aligned with your brand?
Right.
You brief them on what you care about.
Test it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because really it's getting content created, right?
Right.
And this is what they're very good at. These creators know how to create content for the demographics that follow them, for the platforms they're building for.
Right.
So I think that there is this mentality of like, if you start small, just prove that it works. And then from there, you can think about how to scale it. And of course, there are meta business partners that can help and help take that from infancy to maybe something a little bit more scaled out. Yeah.
I'm curious, do you find that sometimes it's different creators depending on the platform or the like Facebook versus
It's a great question. So without getting too far down like terminology, I think
Yeah.
you could look at it. There's macro creators,
Okay.
or like macro influencers. Think like celebrities,
Right.
with millions of followers, and then there's micro creators. Say like the local travel influencer with 100,000 followers. And what we're finding is that both work. Like both can work really well.
Okay.
Some of our early research is showing that across industries, when you add a creator strategy, whether that's macro or micro, to a business as usual campaign or advertising strategy, like we're seeing lower CPAs, lower
Okay.
cost per acquisition. So it shows that. I mean, I think it sums up to the fact that people find creators incredibly authentic. It's not overly branded content most of the time. It feels very natural,
Right.
and it's somebody that you're following anyway as a user. And so it's a really authentic way to have your brand message cut through.
It's really gotten kind of refined and more specialized, I think, as the years have gone by from what it used to be.
Definitely.
Of course, I can't talk to someone from Meta without asking about the metaverse.
Yeah.
So what would you say to travel advertisers about how they should kind of prepare for what you folks believe is coming?
Yeah, we're making a big company bet on the metaverse, on VR in the metaverse. It's going to take time to develop, right? Like it's definitely something that that's going to take years for us to get right and to kind of build utility and use case within for travel brands. The recommendation and the other thing to say is I think that one like foundational point is that we believe that AR is a path to VR.
Okay.
And so I would encourage brands that are looking to accelerate to start exploring with augmented reality.
Okay.
Like what could that look like? There's a lot of opportunity to use AR to enhance, like to reduce friction and enhance like the guest experience, perhaps through like virtual maps or like understanding like things that are events happening around the hotel. And there's a lot of things that could be really interesting for brands to explore, but it's definitely it's a journey.
Yeah.
And I think we're at the outset of AR, and that's going to then manifest and unfold into VR. And if I was giving advice to brands like on where to focus, I would spend time on like a lot of time mastering Web 2 foundations.
Yeah.
So like streamline checkout, optimize landing pages, a creator strategy like we were just talking about, like some of these things that will really help build into things like AR and VR. And then I would spend about maybe 15% of your time thinking around what could be interesting in AR, and then maybe 5% thinking about what could be interesting in VR.
Right.
For the time being, because I think there's a lot.
Because
of
it'll
work.
evolve.
Yeah.
And that content will be even more important, I guess, as you start to develop that strategy.
Exactly, it's a journey, right? And like things will compound; they'll build on one another.
Yeah.
But I can certainly understand like that question from travel advertisers or brands of how we should approach it.
Yeah, because
it's
it's something I think everybody's talking about, but it's not a clear roadmap as to how you move ahead.
And I
So
would say
that's
that-
helpful to hear.
Even internally, we're thinking a lot about how do we build, like what does the VR experience look like for travel?
Right.
And we have teams thinking about building VR experiences for different destinations around the world, whether it's Petra, the Grand Canyon, or like things like to help build in the educational use cases.
Right. Make it
Or-
more concrete, and then people can see, okay, this is how we could how
Yep.
we could use it. So yeah, I definitely look forward to hearing more about that from you as that develops
Absolutely.
in the coming months. So Sanjay Bhatia, thank you so much for
Yes.
joining us from
Thank
Meta.
you so much. I appreciate it.
We
you having me
appreciate it.
here.
Thank you.
you.